I'm Hiba Elias.
And I'm Chevon Drew.
And welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, where we explore how racial justice work
is showing up everywhere around us.
Hey folks, this is Omi Sade Bernie Scott, and I am a member of the host committee for this year's National Facing Race Conference. Facing Race has gone virtual and will take place November the 10th through the 12th. We hope you'll be able to join us along with others working for justice and peace at one of the country's largest multiracial racial justice gatherings. Our keynote speaker this year is one of the leading moral leaders of our time, the Reverend Dr. William Barber.
We have to make sure that hope, not hate, has the last word in the State House, in the White House, and even at the ballot box together.
Civil rights leader, pastor, grassroots organizer, and author, and the architect of the Moral Monday movement, come to be inspired by his message of hope and his vision for renewal. Check out our website for more information and to register today. We hope to see you there.
So we back, another episode, and we are about to hear about the speaker who has been announced for Facing Race.
Yes, Chevon. So we've officially announced our keynote for Facing Race. Civil rights leader, the Reverend Dr. William Barber II will be delivering the keynote address at Facing Race. And we couldn't be more fired up. Dr. Reverend Barber is the architect of the Moral Mondays protests in North Carolina, which in turn have inspired actions across the nation for a principled public policy agenda centering on the needs of poor people and people of color. We also have some other announcements in regards to Facing Race. The program is officially out. I know we've given you a teaser with the schedule at a glance, but the full program is now up on our Facing Race website. Please go check it out. We've listed all the tracks that will be presented at Facing Race. And a fun fact, all of the tracks at Facing Race reflect the work that we do internally at Race Forward. I'm going to name a few tracks and sessions for you all, just so you guys can get some insight on what you can be attending, right? So join us, sit on some great sessions, such as the Activating Movement Journalism to Build Collective Power, which falls under the Narrative Arts and Culture track. Bettering Together, How to Practice Transformative Solidarity, which falls under the Institutional and Sectoral Change track. And then we have Abolitionist Reform Strategy Lab with Durham Beyond Policing Coalition. And that session falls under the Movement and Community Driven Solutions track. And then finally, we have Meeting the Challenge of the Nationalist Surge, which falls under Race Identities and Innovation. We also have Race Flicks, which is our film festival that we partner up with Working Films. They've been great partners for us for conferences on end, and we're ecstatic to be partnering up with them again this year to showcase 7 films that highlight racial justice movement making specifically in the South region. There's some great content, there's some great footage, there's some great movies that you can actually download and watch on your own time. Heat up some popcorn and watch it at night when you're done with attending the conference, right? These are some great films. We also have Racial Justice Reads. It's literary and lit up, literally, by brilliant authors sharing important lessons and stories in a captivating format. And that format is books, right? We love to read books. So please join us in sitting in our Racial Justice Reads program, led up by Rosanna Cruz. And I hope to see y'all there. And again, if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at facingrace@raceforward.org. Looking forward to having you there.
Yes, thank you so much, Hiba. That was a lot of info. Listeners, you can go to facingrace.raceforward.org to check out the program, to check out more about the keynote speaker. There's a lot of info there for you. And then, of course, follow us on social media at Race Forward if you want to follow in real time with the hashtag Facing Race. And I love, Hiba, that, Raleigh, North Carolina was the original host city for the Facing Race conference this year. And I love how y'all have been working so hard to pivot to virtual, but also to really honor the work and the community connections and the spirit of us working with Raleigh this year and working with North Carolina this year.
our local coordinator, Tavia Benjamin. Shout outs to you. You've been doing the thing. I just hope you guys join us. We have a special treat for y'all for the opening ceremony and the entire conference.
Woo! Hiba, we will also have a surprise for folks where Momentum will have a live show at Facing Race. So we will be recording live. You should sign up for the conference so that you can see us do what we do and you can get involved. So it will be on November 10th at 4 p.m. Momentum live at Facing Race with Hiba and Chevon. It's going to be a post-election episode. Who knows? Who knows what the post-election atmosphere will be? But either way, Hiba and I are excited and we always vibe anyway. And we always are ready for the next challenge and so on. And if we weren't ready, we might drink some coffee or something to try to get ready. So you need to come and sign up on facingrace.raceforward.org because we will have a special guest that is TBA. I'm not going to spill the beans. So you really should come hang out with us, y'all.
Regardless of what the outcome may be, this is a moment for us to rebuild the movement and recharge and reset. Come spend that time with us. But right now, we're a week away from the elections. And, I'm hoping that everyone is finalizing their plans for voting, whether you went out and, voted early, whether you guys filled out your ballots to make sure that your votes are in. It's an important time right now. I know I'm anxious. How are you feeling, Chevon?
I mean, should I be honest or is this like polite conversation?
I want you to be honest and raw. Give me the truth.
That's your first mistake. Okay, well, you're not the only one to make it, but I would say I feel kind of tired, honestly. I know that politics, it's a tough game. I get that. But I have to be honest, this election cycle, it can feel really exhausting. There's so much going on. There's so much that you have to be aware of because we are in this pandemic situation. So it's really a lot trying to figure out your plan and maybe figure out the plan for people who are younger than you or other people in your family, trying to help them figure their plan out. So I'm feeling a little tired, honestly, but I'm also feeling hopeful that 2021 will bring us some good news and, some good policy and just a brighter outlook. I really am optimistic and hopeful for that. And I'm glad to feel that way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of folks are feeling the same way you're feeling, Chevon. Media influencers, a lot of celebrities within the hip hop movement are giving their standpoint on where they are right now within this election. Things have come up in the past couple of weeks in regards to the election, and some folks have endorsed presidential candidates. Some have been very disturbing and some have been very surprising. Kind of wanted to get into that a little bit because it's been on my mind. And I definitely wanted to see your opinion. Shall we start?
You asking me for my opinion on what people in hip hop is doing. This about to be a biased opinion, but I'm going to give it. No, it won't be biased. It won't be. I'll share my real opinion.
I want to start off with Ice Cube.
What's up, Cube?
So according to the Politico article, last month, Ice Cube slipped into Washington, D.C. with Kushner and other senior advisors to Trump. Ice Cube was promoting a contract with Black America to help lift African Americans economically, to get the support specifically from these candidates. So Ice Cube has been catching some heat for this political move. A lot of folks are seeing that he's siding with Trump. And me personally, I don't think he's siding with Trump. I think the idea is that he's come up with a contract and he's put it out to both candidates and he's trying to work with whomever comes to. So this is me kind of paraphrasing, in my opinion, what's going on at the moment.
I actually saw his response to people who were upset with him. I personally don't spend that much time anymore feeling upset about what a celebrity is doing. But I appreciate if a celebrity is doing something that I think is cool. And if they're not, if I know them and I have influence or sway with that person, then maybe I might reach out privately. If I don't know them and I'm not in their sphere of influence, I try not to take it really personal because I know that it is popular for people to take a headline and run with it, A, without reading it sometimes, B, without looking to see what the person who's being discussed in the article says for themselves. And I have to be really frank, Hiba. I know that the fake news thing is something that has done some damage in terms of using that term incorrectly and all of that. And I don't think that's okay. But I want to be clear that it's not that media has always treated Black people fairly in the way that they represent them. If you've ever done an interview with a media outlet, you know that sometimes you will sit down and say something and it doesn't look quite the way you expected when it comes out, right? And it doesn't quite put the spin on it that you thought it would. So I don't take it super to heart. I feel like everyone has the opportunity to go lobby for whatever it is that they think is important. The contract with Black America, I think he came up with that with some reform folks that he teamed up with. So I don't think he just made it alone in his basement or anything. So yeah, I just didn't have all the energy and emotion to give it. I mean, I think I said that this cycle has been pretty exhausting for me. And I had to come to some realizations that everything doesn't need to have so much energy behind it, because sometimes whipping people into a frenzy is part of just kind of like a way for some platforms to get more attention, more clicks, more retweets, more of that. And I kind of personally didn't engage much with it except to see what he said about his own reasons for what he's up to and to see like who he worked with to create the platform he created. That's pretty much where I left it, you know, because I don't know him like that. So I'm like,
Which kind of leads me into Diddy. Diddy had endorsed Joe Biden, and that it didn't catch me by surprise because, well, actually I'm lying. It caught me by surprise because a few weeks back, Diddy was actually preaching to hold the Black vote. So he was encouraging the Black community to hold their vote until we got some concrete answers from our candidates in regards to what they're going to do for the Black community, right? And a lot of people online kind of came for Diddy, like, how dare you direct the Black community to not exercise their right to vote? And he recently recanted that, right? So he sat down with Charlamagne the God and hosted an interview and kind of let Charlamagne the God know and all the listeners know that he is indeed endorsing Joe Biden. And he shared a lot of his thoughts on President Donald Trump. And according to the Billboard article that I'm reading now, it says, he just kind of paraphrasing what he said, white men like Trump need to be banished. The way of thinking is dangerous. He literally threatened the lives of our families and going to go vote. And he noted that Trump had deliberately stated stand back and stand by to his following. So it kind of made me feel like we were back in the old days.
Diddy was vote or die. That's what I remember. That's when I used to look to someone like Diddy back in the vote or die days, you know, looking on TV and being like, oh my God. So that to me was fun. The vote or die campaigns used to be fun. I also like the South Park version of them. I don't look to Diddy anymore for that type of guidance either. But, you know, of course, he's free to do what it is that he wants to do in terms of clicking up with different advocates and figuring out a platform. And also he's free to, if he wants to withhold his vote, like, that is your decision. I don't really badger people or shame them regarding their choice because I feel like it's just that. Like, far be it from me to tell another Black person or a person of color that like they should be ashamed of themselves for how they choose to engage or not with a system that was not built for them. I would advocate, and I do advocate. Literally, part of my role is advocating along with other racial justice anchor orgs that Race Forward works with. We advocate the hashtag Together We Vote. So if you were to look up that hashtag, you would see some of the campaigning that we're doing around encouraging people of color to get out and vote for different reasons, just like we encouraged them to previously to fill out the census. So like, again, I'm learning, like, shout out to therapy too, because I'm learning that like really my energy should not be swayed every 5 minutes by what someone else has said, celebrity or not, especially if I don't know them. If it's a celebrity that I have a relationship with somehow, then maybe sure, like maybe I'll be trying to text or trying to get someone in that person's ear or something, you know, show some influence and say like, hey, I think you're going about it the wrong way. But if I don't know them and I'm out of their sphere of influence, I've been kind of like thinking about where my energy can be more positively used. So like the campaigns I just talked about, doing that type of work, and then also just modeling for yourself. And then also calling on other people publicly to do that advocacy for you with these influencers. If you don't know him, but you know somebody who knows him, maybe you tap that person and be like, I think you should talk to him. Other than that, I guess you could armchair quarterback or whatever they say from the sidelines about what he's up to, or you could just get active yourself. The other piece for me that comes up is There are people who feel like they don't want to vote because of like the way voting is not made easy. I mean, if I need to pay taxes, it's a lot of ways for me to do that. I can mail a check, you know what I mean? I could go online and pay. But voting, it seems to be like something that's it's not uniform everywhere in every state in terms of how to do it. The laws aren't uniform. The forms can feel unwieldy. It's not a day off either, is it? Some companies give it as a day off, some don't. Voting is not easy for everyone. So that's another reason why I do not shame people of color who tell me that they're not sure how they're going to get it done. I just try to answer questions and encourage folks and give them information that hopefully will help them to get it done, because voting is not perfect. Vote anyway. Voting won't save us all, but vote anyway, because it's one lever that we can pull in the broader movement of what we're trying to push for. So that's how I see it. But I'm aware that there are systemic factors that can cause folks to feel like they don't want to engage. I just think that making something easier and helping people out and helping give people information is probably better than me yelling at people online. You know what I'm saying? Like celebrities online, like, what you doing?
100%. And I definitely echo everything that you've said. And I plus one the idea of providing resources and materials. And I also just wanted to shout out our anchors real quick: NAACP, the National Urban League.
Not that much time left, folks, for you to get your vote in. So I just want to put out this call to action. You can visit vote.org if you need help figuring out more about where you should be voting or what your polling places are. If you need to mask up and get out there, if you need assistance, you can make a plan with a friend. Check out the hashtag #TogetherWeVote on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook, and try to figure out your plan and get yourself to the polls. Because again, we have an imperfect democracy, but the more people participate in it, the more people who want to shift it, I think the better it can get. So yes, voting, the system may not be perfect. Vote anyway. That's the message I want to leave folks with and encourage y'all to really get out there and exercise your right.
Nicole D. Porter manages the Sentencing Project's state and local advocacy efforts on sentencing reform, voting rights, and eliminating racial disparities in the criminal justice system. The Sentencing Project is a leader in changing the way Americans think about crime and punishment. The Sentencing Project works for a fair and effective U.S. criminal justice system by producing groundbreaking research to promote reforms in sentencing policy, addressing unjust racial disparities in practices, and to advocate for alternatives to incarceration.
Nicole was born in Houston and has lived in Austin, Baltimore, and Ghana. While growing up, Nicole noticed in her late teens and early 20s that many of the young men she grew up with were either in prison or under some form of supervision, which led her to the work she does today. She received her undergraduate degree from Johns Hopkins University and a Master of Public Affairs from the University of Texas at Austin. Previously, Nicole worked for the Appleseed Foundation, National Women's Political Caucus, and the American Prospect magazine. She was named a New Civil Rights Leader by Essence magazine in November 2014 for her work to eliminate mass incarceration.
Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you all. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate you being here.
Major accomplishment. So kudos to everything that you've already accomplished. And it's a pleasure to have you today on the podcast with us.
Appreciate it.
So, Nicole, you were born in Houston. You've lived in Austin, Baltimore, and Ghana. Honestly, it's making me wish I could travel right now. But can you tell the audience a little bit about which city you were in when you started to notice that so many of the young men around you were under some form of state supervision?
Definitely Houston is when I noticed. I was growing up, and I don't know about other people's experiences, but as an adult, I think that there were all sorts of ways that my family signaled to each other when people were locked out that I didn't realize at the time, but definitely recognize now. So visiting people at the holidays and asking about one cousin or an uncle, my grandmother or other family member would say, oh, so-and-so's away or so-and-so's not here or won't be joining us this year. Looking back on it now, it was always present in my family. I mean, I'm a kid of the 90s, and my generation is definitely experienced mass incarceration as it was going on. And people were just disappeared and were away. Didn't even talk about how much time they got or, when they were coming home. But so many people that I grew up with were away, not just in my family, but also in the neighborhood.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for that. I got a chill actually when you started talking about the 90s and how many people got disappeared. Thank you for that.
I was going to add a piece in there. Like, I can definitely relate because I've had a lot of classmates from when I was younger, even some friends and family members as well. It has become a norm and a life reality that we live with. You know, people go away and come out and it's as if nothing happened before. And these are things that need to be spoken about. So I'm glad to be having this conversation with you. I kind of want to get into your role and your position at the Sentencing Project. So if you can share more about that and let the audience know the good fight that you put in over at the Sentencing Project, that would be amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, I am the Director of Advocacy. I work specifically with state and local advocate priorities to challenge mass incarceration. The Sentencing Project is a bridge organization between the activists and the academy. And so I think what I like so much about my work is really working to apply people's ideas around organizing and challenging the status quo, particularly when it comes to responses to crime or the punitiveness in the United States to disappear people, to apply people's ideas and figure out ways to act on them. So I spend time in meetings, now that we're all working from home, a lot of virtual discussion, working to strategize and move conversations forward and move issues forward to try to apply some of the ideas that would actually get at decarceration and other aspects of challenging mass incarceration. So I just wrapped up a call with some colleagues in Maine who, in response to George Floyd, which happened obviously in Minnesota earlier this year, trying to use the conversation nationally that's also happening in Maine in response to what happened in Minnesota and think through an agenda going into next year around racial justice and responding or trying to address some of the criminal justice policies that reinforce racial disparities throughout the system.
Thank you for sharing that, Nicole. That's some deep work. I also want to plug in, a fun fact about Nicole that Nicole has presented at Facing Race in the past years. So I wanted to squeeze that in because we are promoting the conference.
I love the Facing Race conference. And, I will look forward to when we can actually meet in person again. Because I know that those conferences had so many attendees. It's sort of unbelievable to think that we could do that anytime soon with the pandemic. But we'll look forward in the future to coming, to join another Facing Race conference in person and certainly in between any virtual conferences that are happening.
I love that. That was a commercial, literally. Thank you so much.
I mean, I have some fond memories of the Facing Race conferences over the years.
Yes. People say that they leave feeling really revitalized and that it feels like a reunion. They see all kinds of folks in the movement that they hadn't seen in a minute. And so I look forward to it as well. All the hugs and everything, I look forward to it. Now, tell us a little bit about the Sentencing Project's report, Locked Out 2020, that estimates of people denied voting rights due to a felony conviction. This sounds like really deep, deep work. How did this report come together?
We've been reporting on this since the late 90s, and we generate these state estimates every 4 years during the presidential election year. Edition of this report was published in 2016, and this report works to update those numbers. So we found this year that 5.2 million people are still disenfranchised from voting because of a felony conviction. That is a modest decline from 4 years ago, mostly due to a change in Florida that we can get into. Even though there have been reforms, and there have been reforms over the last 25 years since we first started reporting on this as an organization. Sentencing Project first put out numbers in 97 when it first started estimating the number of folks disenfranchised because of a felony conviction. So that information, along with some elections and some clear impact on elections because of disenfranchisement, spurred a lot of activism in the 2000s. And we have worked to document declines in the disenfranchised population, but still over 5 million people are disenfranchised this election season. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But it sort of points to how the criminal justice system functions as a way of disqualifying residents from participating and who governs them. it reinforces the paradox in the United States that even from the beginning, elites worked to limit who could actually govern them in this country. And even still, millions of residents are literally locked out of voting, called to the title of the report because of a felony conviction.
Okay. I feel like somewhat deflated. I actually think about how much work gets done around trying to re-enfranchise people. I almost wonder, how do you stick with this kind of work? You said you update this every 4 years. Hiba was talking about how this work can be exhausting. What is it that keeps people plugging away at this so that, this is a long arc to be proving what's happening over time. How do you keep that funded? How do you keep yourself energized to do this?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One is I am motivated by the people who are doing this work with me, who are organizing, who inspire new ways of thinking for me, and who come to strategy conversations with new organizing tactics. And so I'm, motivated by that. So being in the work and engaging and collaborating with others motivates me, and particularly, people who are directly impacted. So I've had conversations, and next week excited about an online discussion with 2 newly registered voters, one in Nebraska, another one in Tennessee, who voted for the first time this year. So just, that excites me. And knowing that in spite of the millions that are still disenfranchised, that every year there are some people who get their rights back. There are some people who would have gone to prison who aren't going to prison because of decarceration strategy, in spite of the fact that the United States is still world's #1 jailer. And then I think the fact that in spite of all the work, that there are still so many that are impacted by these policies and practices, and it just, continues to call attention to the hypocrisy in the U.S., that it challenges me to think through, well, what isn't working? How can I move? How can I change? And how can my thinking change in order to move this conversation, given that I've been working on this for many years? So I've been working at this stuff a long time, knowing that the problem is still so substantial. It challenges me how to try to respond to the time and also think about what might be possible going forward. Those are 2 things that I hold on to as a way to, keep myself grounded and centered in this work and want to, continue to engage with it.
Okay. I feel inspired just hearing that.
Same. I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because me and Chevon, you should see us on the back end just banking in questions ready to ask you, Nicole. So in this moment where many people in this country are talking about or learning about the branches of government again, there are debates about whether legislative reform lasts long enough versus focusing on appointing judges and packing the courts versus local executive orders. Why do you choose legislative reform as your main route over, let's say, becoming a judge?
Well, on felony voting rights, it is a mix of practices that can expand the vote. There have been executive orders earlier this year when in Iowa, after George Floyd was murdered. In response to that, there were Black Lives Matter activists that worked to pressure the state and the governor to have a racial justice response in Iowa. And because there had been work done to expand the franchise for people to residents with felony conviction, one of the governor's actions was to issue an executive order. Republican governor responding to the demand and the inspired activism by Black Lives Matter activists in that state. And there's been court rulings as well that address felony disenfranchisement and other aspects of the criminal legal system as a way to get at some of the disparity and find remedies to address it. So there isn't one fix. Legislation is one tool in the toolbox to undo the policies and practices that reinforce structural racism in the United States, the policies that disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities. Even in states where the governor has taken a step through their executive authority to do something, the law still needs to be fixed, either through constitutional change, which could be done by ballot measure. There's a ballot measure right now Californians are voting on in November to expand the vote to people on parole. So that's a part of the conversation. And even in Iowa, where this executive order happened, and the same thing happened in New York, where an executive order happened, the underlying law needs to change. So there is a mix of change that needs to happen in states one target can be legislatively to change that law. And then there can be other remedies too, either through executive actions or through the court, or trying to sort of get favorable rulings with judges.
Wow. I just learned so much. My follow-up question to that is, what would you say to people who are watching and reading about these types of changes and saying, like, we've seen legislative change for people with felonies, but then it's not really something that can be held up in practice? Like, maybe it's like, now there's a poll tax, then you have to pay your fees as a felon, and then you can't vote if you don't pay all these fees, and you don't have money to pay the fees.
Yeah, no, there's a huge distance between what's on paper and what happens in practice, what happens in a criminal or government statute and what happens in practice. And so I would say how that distance can be filled is through organizing and through harnessing the collective power and awareness of the community to live up to the spirit of whatever the ideal policy might be, if it's enacted, or to change policy in order to improve the lives and ensure that all residents can live with dignity and support themselves and their families and their communities. Any challenge or critiques or questions that people have because their real lives aren't impacted by the supposed law, and particularly given that we're in the United States where the law can be violent in and of itself. I mean, the case law that legitimates police breaking into people's homes while they're sleeping and protects them, and protects them from murdering people is the law and is backed up by the courts. And yet clearly that's not fair, nor is it just. And dealing with that, trying to change that law, it's not even about reform, trying to transform the way the state treats all citizens, all residents really, including Black and brown ones, so that the law can't be used as a pretext to protect the police and other law enforcement is critical. And it's through organizing and trying to shift norms to try to establish new progressive norms in this country through community work is what needs to happen.
That's a great segue to my next question, because you just got my brain percolating. Given the work around reform and all the work to establish the new norms, as you mentioned, what do you tell people, like specifically Black and brown folk, who say their votes, we're coming up on the cusp of, election day, who say their votes don't count, right? Who say that there's no reason for me to vote, there's electoral votes, it's not going to matter anyway. What do you tell folks who feel that way and are adamant in that position, but have the right to go vote, right? Like, all your work is around individuals who aren't able, right? What do you tell folks who have that right and aren't choosing to practice or exercise or, flex?
Yeah, I have a cousin who refuses to vote, and we have many conversations about this. And what I share with him, his participating in the franchise is a way for him to, because he is so opinionated on so many issues that affect himself and his family. And to say his vote is a way for him to show up and to make his perspectives heard with people who will have a role in governing him. But it's not surprising to me that my cousin, who's in his early 30s, Black man in Houston, feels that way, because he has received so many signals over the course of his life that his vote doesn't matter, or that, participating in the franchise won't have real impact on his life. But I will say that there are so many electoral contests that have been close in this country, and maybe not all of them have been, or the majority of them aren't, but there certainly are a handful that are. And participating in the franchise can help us to show up each time there might be a chance for us to have a specific voice in who governs us. That 2000 election, the 2000 presidential election that hinged on Florida, was decided on 537 votes. The fact that tens of thousands of residents at the time were disqualified from voting because of a felony conviction went on to activate a bunch of reform that resulted in the 2018 ballot measure in Florida that restored the right to vote to up to 1.5 million residents in that state. But even before that, activated tons of campaigns around the country that restored the vote to tens of thousands of residents, not just in Florida, but all around the country. So it is important that everyone vote, but I also understand the resistance to voting from some of our neighbors and family who've been so marginalized and so are not enthusiastic at all about all of these electoral contests because they don't see the impact on their real lives. And so I just think continued conversation, showing how these votes, how these elections do impact people's real lives. I hope that at some point my cousin understands that, but in the meantime, I know I'm going to show up, I'm going to vote, and that I'm doing this work to help expand the franchise to as many people as possible.
I think right now in this moment, like that's a necessary conversation to have with all our family members and friends. Like I know I'm taking 10 people with me to the polls. I think it's very crucial, but I also understand, as you mentioned, the narrative around their votes not counting. I think it's because of the things that they've seen in their lifetime, but also pre-existing history. So thank you for sharing that.
When you're talking about people who don't feel like their vote might count, I'm thinking about people, some of them celebrities who are in the public eye now, like a Snoop Dogg saying, like, this is my first time voting. I'm just thinking of people who it's almost like they're celebrities, so maybe people assumed that they were voting.
You know, I listened to some of Snoop Dogg's interview and it sounded like, you know, I don't know his story completely, but it sounded like he didn't realize that he could vote. And I think that's one of the essential problems with the felony voting right laws in the country, and why I hope that the report is helpful, and why there's so much education, public education, that needs to happen around this. First of all, this country was founded on the principle that only white male elites should vote. And ever since then, there's been a fight to try to expand the franchise to include everyone who should have a role and who governs us in this republic. So, you know, if I understood Snoop's comments specifically, he has a felony conviction. He lives in California. Maybe he was on supervision. I'm not exactly sure, but he certainly isn't on supervision now and didn't realize that even though he was off what we call off paper, that he could vote. And hopefully with Proposition 17, there will be no confusion in California for its residents, because I think the last polling I saw, over 60% of the electorate supported Proposition 17, which would expand voting rights to people on parole in the state. And there will be no confusion for anyone in California, even if they're on parole, whether or not they can vote. That issue and Snoop's confusion, and also the fact that there are still over 5.2 million people who are disenfranchised from voting, has deepened my resolve to push for voting rights for everyone, so that there's no confusion around voting rights when somebody has a felony conviction, which would mean that even people in prison should have the right to vote, and to push us to actually help people organize from inside of prison to extend the voting rights to them. The United States is an outlier in that regard. There are 2 states in the District of Columbia, as well as Puerto Rico, where people in prison no longer lose their right to vote. But there are, 1.4 million people who are behind prison walls today who won't be able to vote in the election, in addition to the majority of the folks in the community who make up that 5.2 million number.
Oh my gosh. I would like to take you around to some friends' houses with felonies so you could explain some stuff.
I want to go back to the point that Chevon made around celebrities. There have been a lot of celebrities that are now taking the forefront and having conversations around energizing the Black community to specifically go out and vote. What are your thoughts about celebrity influencers like Kim Kardashian getting involved in criminal justice advocacy?
Well, for me, it signals how the culture is changing if celebrities are saying this, and paying attention closely to what they say sort of helps me, someone who cares about organizing and shaping progressive norms, sort of gives me a sense of how our work is sort of penetrating the culture. I mean, I think that's one reason to sort of pay attention to what celebrities say and how they view these issues. And also they are influencers, right? They influence their fans and so forth. So what they say can help shape those progressive norms. I think it's helpful. I also think they're saying that and they're believing that would not happen without organizing, and would not happen without people on the ground and their fans pushing them. I actually saw in New York when Remy Ma got out of prison, I think she was promoting maybe an album, and she happened to be in some community forum. And one of the folks in the forum asked her about a jail campaign in New York City. Just remembering that interaction, she hadn't heard about it. She didn't know about it. But the fact that this woman got up and asked her this question probably got her thinking about it. I would hope got her thinking about it a little bit. And, I don't know where she is today on this issue specifically, but given her own experience around being in prison and some of the work that she was doing to raise attention to women who were incarcerated at the time, I hope help push her a little bit. And maybe she would now have an answer to that woman's question if she were asked again.
Yes. I almost wondered if you wanted to say anything about the origin of the term felon while we're talking about all this.
That's something for me to look into, exactly the origin of that term. I will say that felony is used as a proxy for race, particularly when it comes to felony disenfranchisement. So there's a history to that in states like Mississippi and Alabama following, during the post-Reconstruction period when they were reconstituting themselves, that in those states specifically, they specify out which felonies are disqualifying ones from voting. And there's case law history that affirms that white male elites at the time who were writing the Alabama's Constitution chose felonies that they thought Black residents were more likely to commit as a way to disenfranchise people with felonies from voting, which means in practice that there's a list of crimes of moral turpitude in Alabama's Constitution that disenfranchises people from voting. And on that list includes the crime of wife beating, the felony of wife beating, but not murder. So, they were just thinking about men at the time of the vote and at the time of writing this Constitution. So Black men could be disqualified from voting for beating their wives, but not for killing them.
Ooh. You went all the places that I was hoping you would go. I want to thank you. That was a question that I know it's not directly related to the report in that way, but it's like that history. You kept touching on history in this interview. So I just thought you could share that with the audience. I really appreciate it. It almost gives me chills to just hear, that term is about taking people's rights, taking people's land, almost like turning them into some type of chattel again,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the system that emerged after Reconstruction focused on criminalizing Black residents in particular, and then that's expanded, since then to include other communities of color, other racial and ethnic minorities, but specifically to disappear people back to the plantations that they were liberated from. That has been the evolution around systems of oppression in the United States, even since the abolition of slavery, and even now in the midst of mass incarceration. There are still prisons that are on old plantations. Angola in Louisiana is actually on an old plantation. If you go to Parchment in Mississippi, it's actually on land that used to be a plantation. So there are deep connections to this. I also think the criminal legal system in and of itself is because this country imagines the criminal to be Black, and everything flows from that, including how punitive we are. The fact that death penalty is an option, the fact that life without parole is an option, it's because of the state's goal around controlling Black residents in particular. And even though other residents are caught up in it, it's because of those deep structures that focus on the social control of Black male residents in particular in the United States.
It's a harsh pill to swallow, but it's reality. I had a final question before we actually wrap up. The Sentencing Project describes itself as working for a fair and effective U.S. criminal justice system. What do you say to people who are interested in abolition? Does your work have a relationship to abolitionist frameworks?
It absolutely does. We're a bridge between the activists and the academy. There's a spectrum of movement that has to push and challenge the policies that get us to being the world's #1 jailer. And in that spectrum includes abolition. We would not be able to push these conversations and reshape the norms that drive punitiveness in this country without having abolitionist perspectives included in these discussions at the table, helping to push from the left, from a radical perspective. And so definitely the Sentencing Project works with abolitionists. When we celebrated our 25th year anniversary, we put together a collection of essays that talked about where the criminal legal system should be going, and included in that collection of essays was an essay by Angela Davis. So we know that some progressive practitioners who are judges and law enforcement who are at the table, but we also center and include the perspectives of abolitionists as well, and think that we can't be pushed and we can't challenge mass incarceration without including those lines of thinking in our strategizing and in the work that we're doing.
Will you be my Zoom friend? Because everything you're saying is just lifting me up. I know it's tough stuff, but the realness with which you respond to every question, your depth of knowledge, your acknowledgement of the way anti-Blackness functions in the criminal justice system, criminalizing of Blackness itself and trying to control Black bodies. It's like, I just feel like you're being really frank in a way that I hope brings in some of the audience who maybe have not done some research on the details of what sentencing disparities are all about. I just wonder, is there one factoid from the report that you would want people to like walk away with today? Like one statistic or one, I don't know, idea?
Yeah, well, 5.2 million people are disenfranchised from voting this November. And that's after Florida, changed its constitution via ballot measure in 2018. And we didn't even get into like the shenanigans that the Florida legislature did by instituting essentially a poll tax to limit the impact of that ballot measure. But 5.2 million is a lot of people to be disenfranchised from voting. And that's after all of these years of reform, which again sort of speaks to why we have to be even bolder in trying to undo these policies that limit voting for people with felony conviction, particularly given the history of it.
Nicole, we just want to thank you once more for joining us today.
Yeah. Do you want to tell folks where to follow you before you run?
Sure. They can follow me at Nicole Porter on Twitter and Instagram, and find more information at sentencingproject.org, where we have our report and other information as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
So you've all heard Nicole join us on this episode of Momentum. You guys heard her excitement around facing race. Just want to remind y'all that the program is officially up. And also remember that Chevon and I will be opening up the conference on November 10th at 4 p.m. So if you want to see us live, visit our Facing Race website and register. And we hope to see you there.
Everyone, we encourage you to rate and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Pandora. Go check us out. Please leave us some wonderful comments. Try to encourage us. So thank y'all so much. Share it with a friend. Tell a friend to subscribe and help us get the word out there about all this racial justice work that Race Forward is doing, that our esteemed guests are doing. And please do go vote. Bye.
Later, y'all.